she's passionate about telling stories of amazing women who are rocking the world and empowering women to live, love, and thrive. Here's your host, Katherine Gray.
Hi, welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Live, Love, Thrive's Women Empowerment Hour, brought to you by 360 Karma. And today we have on Dr. Jennifer Lang, who is not only a doctor, OBGYN, but also an author, the founder of Buzz Labs, and also the founder of a nonprofit that has opened 80 clinics around the globe to help prevent cervical cancer in underserved countries and places. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Jennifer Lang. Hi. You've done so much. It's like, wow, how did I get everything in there? There's no grass growing over here.
Gotta keep going.
That's it. That's it. We know all about that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. What should we talk about first? Let's talk about your journey to becoming an OBGYN, and then we're going to talk about the nonprofit, and then finally this new invention you have that's going to Buzz Labs is creating products to help end sexual violence, which is huge in this country. We'll talk about some of those statistics. I know I've heard, more than 25% of students on campuses, women, are subject to rape, and it's just out of control. And I'm so happy that you're doing something positive toward it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me to talk about these issues. It's really important that we educate and understand what we're dealing with so we can come up with solutions.
Yeah, thank goodness for Me Too. It's really stirred the conversation. And I think it's really interesting, too, that you, first of all, let's say you immigrated here from Canada. I'm big on talking about immigration these days and how important it is to bring in people like yourself that are our talent pool of amazing people in this country.
Wasn't quite immigration because my mother got us passports. So I'm a dual citizen. My mother is from upstate New York. My dad's from Canada. I was born and raised in Canada, but with passport.
But thank God we're letting you in,
I mean, better behave myself. They might change their mind.
Exactly. It's a crazy world we're living in. So you had shared with me you were actually going to go to school in Canada, McGill, and then you got an offer that you couldn't refuse here at Smith, right?
Yeah. So a recruiter came to my Toronto, large Toronto public school, and we really don't have that kind of private, small liberal arts experience in Canada. And it just seems so unique. Yeah. I was busy running the women's issues group and all, in my high school. Yeah. So the idea of this hertopia of progressive, feminist,
really spoke to
change
you.
Makers. I was like, what? Then I went for a weekend and visited this idyllic campus with, a paradise pond in the middle. And
now, did you know then that you were going to be a doctor?
I had a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew that I was probably going to do the pre-med track. But once I got to Smith, funny enough, I decided to study literature. I mean, I did pre-med as well, but I fell in love with their literature classes and decided to be a comparative literature major with Spanish and English. And part of that, I think, had to do with being raised in Canada, which is a bilingual country. So you study French from, the earliest grades on up. Right. All official communication from the federal government comes in 2 languages. When I moved to the States, I realized I better learn Spanish.
Right.
I did.
It's like that old joke about what do you call a person that knows 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call a person that knows 1 language? American.
Oh.
I know it's a bad joke, but it's so true.
It's changing though as our demographics change.
I hope
there's this wonderful richness. And anyway, so I did my first summer after freshman year at Smith. I went to volunteer this program at Bellevue Hospital in New York City.
Oh, yeah, I know Bellevue.
In the emergency department.
Yeah.
It was...
Wait, isn't that where they send all the prisoners?
Yeah. Their prisoners came through. I mean, you saw everything there. But I saw that about half the patients spoke Spanish. And so I said, if I want to do medicine in this country, I have to learn Spanish.
Right.
So I, changed my major and started studying Spanish intensively, ended up doing some time in Costa Rica and then a semester abroad in Bolivia, in La Paz.
Wow, how interesting.
Yeah, I wrote for the Bolivian Times. These are all these random kind of things that I I did in my life.
So you have always been this way, where you're doing a lot of different things.
I like to stay busy, and I'm a curious person. I like to explore.
It keeps us stimulated to always be changing and evolving and growing. So you went to medical school at Albert Einstein in New York.
In New York.
And
I was really drawn there because Vic Seidel was faculty at that time. He was the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989 for his work for Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Wow.
And so they addressed the issue of nuclear war, gun violence, climate change, and persistent organic pollutants were kind of the four main issues. And I was really drawn to the school. It had a bit of a how shall I say this? It had a history of being on the edge of progressive, change.
And then you won the Dean's Award there, right? For the most promising in the future of medicine, which is so interesting that you're doing, futuristic things toward all that.
I didn't think of it that way, but I mean,
they saw something in you back then.
Maybe they did. I loved my time there. Yeah. The Bronx was a fascinating borough to be in because as real estate went nuts in Manhattan, no one could afford to move there. Yeah. So people were coming from all over the world to the Bronx. Right. So I got to see leprosy, malaria, and pregnancy. It was really...
I didn't even know leprosy existed then.
It still does.
Wow,
Yeah, it still does in pockets around the world, but you wouldn't know it because we don't see a lot of it in America, except in the Bronx.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I don't know if I'll be dining there.
Yeah.
So after that, you did a fellowship at UCLA. You came back here.
No, so then I did a residency in OBGYN. After, school just goes on and on. I mean, I've done more school than care to admit. So a 4-year residency in OBGYN.
And that was still in New York?
In New York, yeah.
Yeah, and that's when you had your first child, was it?
No.
No, okay.
And then, so that was the 4 years to become an obstetrician gynecologist. So that's delivering babies and doing benign.
I knew there was a baby in there somewhere.
Benign, hysterectomies and those kinds of.
And what drew you to being an OBGYN? What was that draw?
Well, I grew up on a farm in Canada. Yeah. And my father was one of the first cattlemen. It's funny because I'm a vegan now. Yeah. But to be doing in vitro fertilization with cattle.
You're kidding.
Yeah, so from a very young age, I was very aware of reproduction and
fascinated
the systems
with it.
and the technologies and managing it and, watching the calves be born every spring and all of that. So I think there was some of that. However, when I was a medical student at Einstein, I had the chance to rotate through the cancer surgery, so gynecologic oncology, and I was inspired by talking about inspiring women. Yes, I was mentored by the first female president of the Society for Gynecologic Oncology. Wow, one of the first female presidents of ASCO, American Society of Clinical Oncology, just a powerhouse in the field, and I really admired her, and I want to be like her. I also really related to the patient population we were working with. Mm-hmm. My mother's family is of Ashkenazi Jewish background, and there's this gene mutation called BRCA, BRCA1 and 2, which is quite high, about 1 in 40 carrier rates in Ashkenazi Jews. Oh my gosh. And it leads to an elevated risk for developing ovarian cancer. Right. So I was meeting all of these women on the wards who really reminded me of my mother, my aunt, my grandmother. Right. And I was just very moved by that experience.
Right. Wanted to help.
Yeah. I also enjoyed doing surgery very much.
Wow.
So but the path to that is OBGYN first and then gynecologic oncology fellowship. So that's what brought me to LA.
I see. And that's when you did your fellowship at UCLA.
Yeah. UCLA and Cedars had a joint fellowship program at that time. So I moved between the hospitals.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And then you decided to give that practice up eventually after a long time and start to head up this nonprofit.
Well, so I had a colleague who was a physician of radiation oncology, and we were working at a cancer center together.
Yes.
And she had a very impactful visit to Senegal, where she had been trying to deliver a radiation linear accelerator to give radiation, because we actually have more linear accelerators on a several block strip of Wilshire Boulevard here in LA than they did at that time on the entire continent of Africa.
Okay, so now people might not know what that is.
Oh, okay.
I might be those people.
Okay. No problem. So you've heard of radiation therapy for cancer?
Right.
Yeah, so you need a machine to deliver the dose of radiation.
Got it. And so they don't have those very prevalent in other countries.
That's right. In resource-poor countries, they're very expensive machines, not only to, attain, but to maintain. And so many of the machines that are out there are not even serviced properly or developing very specific doses, which is essential with radiation therapy.
I bet. Yeah.
So anyway, she was there, and while they were waiting for the machine to arrive, because the problems of trying to transport equipment across borders, very difficult. She had this experience of just doing some screening in a population, discovering all of these women, cervical screening. Pardon me, I forgot to mention this. Yeah. And discovering all of these women that had pre-invasive cervical lesions.
Oh my gosh.
And, that's where you want to do the intervention before you develop advanced cancer.
Right.
And then you have to, travel across 5 countries to get to one of these machines with a 6-month waiting list that might not even be giving you the right dose.
So then you all thought, how can we help change this?
That's right. So we planned a trip to Ethiopia for the following spring. And we went there with the intention of, bringing some equipment, screening women, treating them there, and leaving. We thought we could. There's a 90% cure rate with this, 11-minute procedure, same day visit. It's remarkable.
Wow,
so
that
we
is
said we could
remarkable.
help a lot of people. And what happened was we had the good luck to arrive at a teaching hospital in Mekelle called Eider Teaching Hospital. And there were medical students, residents, nurses who were excellent, highly skilled, learned how to do these techniques. And within several days of seeing and treating patients, we Dr. Gordon and I looked at each other and we said, this needs to be a sustainable model. We need to rethink this whole thing. Right. So on the airplane back from that trip, on the back of a vomit bag, I actually just drew up this model for what I called the clinic in a suitcase, and which was how to package all of the equipment that would be needed to see and treat, X number of women, but with the intention of bringing this rolling suitcase so you don't have to ship things and that get stuck in customs, but you just roll the suitcase right with you.
That's brilliant.
And you can take volunteer trainers and set up a large training program at a central location, train and certify local healthcare professionals, leave the equipment, and it's a mass scale.
Now this is for the preventive cervical cancer.
Yes, so this,
not to treat the cancer itself.
Right. So we're lucky with cervical cancer. It sounds crazy to even say that, but it is. It is one of the most lethal, prevalent kinds of cancer to affect globally, not in America. That affects women of reproductive age.
Right. So when you do the preventive, let's say you see that they're susceptible to it happening, then what is the next step? How do you prevent it?
Yeah, so there is so cervical cancer, almost all of it is caused by the HPV virus. Oh. And we now have a vaccine for that. Right. Which is really important that boys, girls, young men, young women get vaccinated because globally this is a massive issue and it's preventable. So you have about a 10-year window from the time you're exposed to the virus before it becomes, frankly, invasive cancer. Wow. Any time during that 10-year window, a single screening visit can reduce a woman's risk of dying of cancer by half.
So they then take the...
So what you do?
Shot?
No.
Oh,
no.
So
you have to give the vaccine ahead of being exposed.
Got it.
So what we were doing, and now there are, some... alternative methods as well. But what we were doing is just spraying vinegar, waiting 60 seconds, then shining a white light, like a flashlight, onto the cervix.
Right.
And pre-cancerous cells show up white, like this. You
Right.
know? And so you can train people to recognize those changes.
Wow.
And then offer an immediate, we're using cryotherapy, which is just carbon dioxide gas to freeze, create an ice ball, and destroy those cells. And a 90% cure rate, single visit.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And you guys ended up doing this in creating 80 clinics around the world in these
multiple countries. Asia, the Caribbean, Africa.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's still going. So well over 100,000 women have now come through our clinics.
That's incredible.
The results are reported monthly, so we're keeping track of data. Anyway, so that was a wonderful experience in the nonprofit world that I had.
Right. And we were talking about things are moving in a direction from nonprofit to this like socially profitable type of businesses that are for the greater good,
right? And
how and why those are more sustainable, right? And it's a great conversation. In fact, it could be a whole show about how and why people are starting to move in that direction, because so many charities are struggling and needing grants and need funding, but these ones that are socially responsible, profitable businesses are actually the ones that are doing the most good in the world. And so let's talk about that, because now that's your new venture, which is Buzz Labs.
Yes.
Yeah. And
you really hit it, because I believe that if you are bringing a service that adds real value, that it is going to be most impactful if it is financially sustainable business model.
Right.
And that we can affect the largest impact of change when we combine profit and purpose.
Right.
And many people have spoken about this, written about this. There's this old sense that you have to choose one or the other.
Right.
It's like you can have a mission or you can have a real business.
Right.
That's just a complete false, assumption.
It's so wonderful now that it's coming together and being socially acceptable, or just culturally acceptable to marry the two.
Yes. And I think it's necessary.
And it makes sense. Yeah. And it makes sense, and for it to be sustainable.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So, I think that as a gynecologist, I myself am also a survivor of sexual assault, but also as a gynecologist, I had witnessed through my career, so many cases, too many cases, and then doing the international work again.
I can't even imagine.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So I was actually at a conference and I was presenting about the work of the nonprofit, and it was a conference for women investing in women. So the audience was filled with, VCs and tech entrepreneurs and, people who were really creative and really passionate about change in the world.
Right.
And the keynote speaker, this is just before Me Too, kind of the second wave of Me Too hit in 2017, the keynote speaker got up and told her own assault story. I thought she was incredibly brave to do that.
Right.
And it involved incapacitation assault. So that means that a drug or an alcohol is given to someone, and it's not always a woman. So, men are assaulted as well. And in fact, we need to be talking more about that to destigmatize so that men feel as comfortable coming forward, reporting, and getting help.
Absolutely.
But so somebody is given an intoxicating substance, either against their will, if it's, slipped into a drink, or, the elephant in the room is voluntary incapacitation, which is essentially known as binge drinking.
Right.
Or, 90% of the social scene at most colleges.
Yeah, I think almost everybody's done it once in their life. Yeah.
So, for instance, if you've ever had a night that's a little fuzzy or you can't remember, that is an example of as long as you drink voluntarily,
Right,
voluntary
right.
incapacitation.
Right.
So your level of consciousness was
Yeah.
affected to
Yeah.
the point where your brain could not form new memories.
Right. And so that brings us to
Yeah.
why you created this new product. And
Yes.
it's going to be one of many products that's a bracelet
Yes.
that you and your circle of friends wears to keep tabs on each other if and it measures your alcohol level, or how does it work?
Yeah, so, it comes down to this essential issue. How do you know when someone lacks the capacity to give consent to sex?
Right.
How do you know when someone is just too drunk?
Right.
Right now, we don't. We're
Right.
guessing.
Yes.
And that's not a good place to be.
Right.
And we don't need to be
Right.
because we have the technology.
Yes.
And so what I've developed is it's called the Buzz Band.
Right.
And it performs continuous transdermal blood alcohol content monitoring.
Right.
Using a near infrared sensor, so it's real time. And
And it works with an app, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you just put the band on before you go out for the evening. You have in the app entered a circle of friends who
Right.
you trust.
A band of friends.
That's right. I'll have to credit you for I'm going to use that. Yeah. And when your blood alcohol enters what we're calling the red zone.
Right.
So this is where that level of consciousness is impacted, new memory formation is impaired.
Yes.
You don't have to do anything. And that's actually a really important part of this system
Right.
is that it passively, you just have it on your
Yeah.
wrist.
Buddy
Because-
system.
And because we all know the first thing that goes out the window is your judgment
Yes.
about what you should do
Right.
or not do.
Right.
So when you enter this zone, your friends get an alert. They don't have to be wearing a band. They just
Right.
have to have the app in their phone.
Right.
And they know with a GPS located beacon where you are. And they
Wow.
know to check in on you. Make sure you
Wow.
get home safe.
Wow.
And
have you tested this out? Like
only the
Is it-
idea of it.
yes.
So I'm early stage right
stage,
now.
and you just got a grant, right? Or you're working on a grant?
Yes, so I'm
Okay.
in my first fundraising round,
Right,
which
okay,
is an
cool.
angel round,
Yeah.
and meeting with so many fascinating, passionate investors
Yeah.
who really understand the scope of this problem. And as you mentioned before, the statistics are devastating.
Yes, yes.
Columbia University released a study showing 28% of undergraduate females
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
reported experiencing assault within their 4 years on campus.
Right.
So this is
This
just
would really be great for the
unacceptable.
campus girls, like,
Yes.
for a sorority of girls to all wear them.
And fraternity
yeah.
brothers.
And fraternity brothers. Yep,
Because
Both, yeah.
they need to watch out for each other
Yes.
just as well.
Right.
If one of them goes red zone, he's going to be less sensitive to receiving cues from a
Right.
woman.
Now, how sensitive is it? Do they have to be, like, obliterated or just a little tipsy?
Well, no, because, I'm not saying don't drink and have sex.
Right.
That would be ridiculous.
Right.
Nobody would,
Right. But this
They're
is
like,
if
that's the
somebody's,
point.
like, past the...
Yes, this
Yeah.
is somebody's level of consciousness
Right.
it's significantly
Because
impaired.
that's typically when these assaults happen. Yeah.
About 70% of the time, this is
Right.
when they happen.
Right.
So
So-
this is not going to prevent all sexual assault on campus, but it could really reduce,
Right.
significantly reduce.
And I would think besides this product, it sounds like Buzz Labs is looking for other ideas that help
Absolutely.
prevent or end sexual violence. So where would people find you? I believe your website's up, but for our podcast listeners, it's buzzlabs.co.
That's my email, but getbuzzband.co.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
buzzband.co.
Correct, yes.
Okay, because I want them to know where to find you.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And or contact me directly, Jennifer at buzzlabs.co.
Jennifer at buzzlabs.co.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Jennifer Lang, you're doing some great work. You've done amazing work, and obviously you're continuing to do incredible work.
Thank you.
Always thinking out of the box and making things that are interesting and innovative, and I think you're onto something with this Buzz Labs.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure.
So
talking to you.
nice to have you. I appreciate you being on. I appreciate the great work that you're doing. I hope our listeners will look out for all the products coming from Buzz Labs, and maybe you're an investor wanting to invest in something like this for your kids' sake, and just for making the world a little safer place, right?
Thank you. That's the idea.
Thank you for tuning in. We will see you same time next week. Make it a great week. Hugs and happiness.